Why do you want to hold on to a painful past? It's a bit silly if we understand that by holding on to it in this way, we're just hurting ourselves. What I personally find helpful is to cut through all the political stuff and question really deeply what's the fundamental reason why people suffer. Because the answers to the world's problems do not lie externally.
Mick, thanks for dropping into the podcast today.
Thank you.
So one of the questions I wanted to begin to explore with you is we all struggle to cope with uncertainty in our life at various different levels.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very normal human response.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, what is it that lies at the heart of that struggle, do you think, to cope with uncertainty?
I think in general it seems like an inability to accept the fundamental nature of our human life. That in truth we live in an existence full of uncertainty, but we struggle to accept that fact that things are that way. So it's almost as if we live almost like in a parallel universe in which we want everything to be right, everything to go our way, but when we open our eyes, we see things that we don't want to happen. Last year, my mum passed away, but the year leading up to that, she had a fall which sort of started like a sequence of events in which she ended up in hospital and then later in nursing home and then passed away. But at that stage when she was in the hospital, it was really great from my point of view. It was the best time that I've had to have like decent conversations with mum, because I think when suffering becomes unavoidable, it's just in your face, and you see your own vulnerability, then everything just drops. And at that point, you can actually have a heart-to-heart conversation with the person. So as I was sitting there one day with her in the hospital, and she was quite frail at that point, I sort of had to help her to her seat. But there's just like a pause in which I thought, well, this is a good time to ask the question, like, did you ever think you'd end up like this, Mum? And she paused for a moment. As just one word answer, it was just no. And for her at that point, I could sort of see it in her eyes, it's like, how did I get here? You know, although we live in this world full of uncertainty, there are certain inevitables or unavoidables that we choose not to look at and find difficult to accept.
So why do we choose not to look at it then? What's blinding us to that reality?
Yeah, it's a good question, actually. I think it's just difficult to look at. Like, people don't want to talk about sickness, for example. People don't want to talk about aging or death. Even for the people that are in hospital, for example, near the end of their life, they've not necessarily come to that point where they've fully embraced their situation. They're still probably they're trying to understand how on earth I got here from where I was. Because that future that they're living in now, that present moment, was completely uncertain back then. But from one point of view, it's certain if we live for long enough. So for most people, like the sufferings of aging, sickness and death is just like, I don't know what to do with this. And I don't know what to do with it, so therefore I'll put it out on the curb for someone else to collect. Or I'll deal with it when it comes. But in truth, if we don't know how to deal with it now, how are we going to deal with it when it actually comes? If we can't think about it now, how are we going to be when we can't walk, when we have to be toileted by someone else? You know, it was like the straw that broke the camel's back for my mum when she had to be craned to the toilet because she couldn't actually get out of her bed. And that sort of really ended up breaking her spirit. And, you know, it's the case for many people who visit the sick or the dying in hospital, for example. They're looking at that, but they don't know what to say. They don't know how to deal with it. In fact, many people don't want to see them in that way. I want to remember them as they were. But I can speak from personal experience because, you know, I have the good fortune to have met Buddha's teachings within this tradition. For me, the decline of my mum was one of the greatest teachings I've ever received, actually. It was like a Buddhist book or a Dharma book in Technicolor. I saw the truth of aging, I saw the truth of sickness, and I saw the truth of death. none of which shocked me, but deeply impacted my mind and deepened my conviction in my own chosen path in this life, a path in which I'm trying to resolve issues within my heart, trying to follow positive, powerful, strong, stable minds instead of weak, fearful minds, as most people do actually. Out of fear, people turn to all sorts of things to sort of escape from that pain within.
But do you think that, at some level, this is kind of it's more of a reflection of someone who, is at a certain point in their life? But if I'm 21 and my body's healthy and everything is, what it is in my life, maybe good days, bad days, it's just life from that perspective.
Yeah.
So from that point of view, it seems almost compelling to just push it down the road. I just want to get on with my life. I don't want to be too introspective at this point.
Yeah, it's a good point. Back at home in Australia, we have bushfires quite often. And so we have bushfire season in summertime. And at that time, or before that time, I should say, before that time, the authorities sort of encourage people to prepare for the season ahead, especially if you live in the bush. And so they encourage you to clean your property around your house, to clean the gutters and so forth. So a person who thinks ahead, prepares for what may lie ahead. And so they follow the instructions. And when the fires come, they have confidence to sit it out, so to speak. And that preparation in itself is actually encouraging for them, because they know that they're doing something to prepare themselves for the future, to protect their assets. And I see in the world, especially in this modern world, people are often trying to escape. Everyone's like an escape artist. They're trying to escape from something that's within their heart. And we can put that off until later and later and later and later. But at some point, our ability to sort of prepare for that time will become so narrow. We won't have time. We'll be just left with that fire, that unprepared for fire in our life. And at that point, all that we've done in that life up to that point will have no great meaning for us, the places that we've been to. So I'm not saying not enjoy ourselves, especially in our youth. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that to coincide with a life in which we enjoy our friends, families and outings and so forth, is that we try to look a little bit more deeper at the life in general, life as being like a journey. A number of years ago, flying back from the UK to Australia, on the second leg from Dubai to Sydney, I was sitting next to a lovely young woman, and she was telling me a little bit about her trip. And she'd just been to some place in Europe on a nice riverboat cruise. She was a travel blogger. That was her job. So her job was to fly from Australia to go to Europe, to get on a boat, have a nice time.
Tough job.
Yeah, people say tough job. Love to have that job. Fantastic. I'd never get sick of it. So there I am sitting next to this travel blogger, having that wonderful holiday. Later then in the flight, we're sort of entering into Australian airspace, and we hit this turbulence. I've never had turbulence like this before. It was like wild, not up and down, but side by side. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is it. The plane's going to fall out of the sky. So I go into meditation. I'm just sort of quite comfortable there, but I feel a bit of commotion next to me, and it's this lady, and she's beside herself with fear. She doesn't know what to do, what to turn to. Her phone's not working. The entertainment system, it means nothing for her anymore. What she's got in her heart is a fear she cannot escape. She's locked in with a seatbelt. The attendants is sitting down because of the turbulence. She's just there with her mind. If I were to ask her then, did you ever expect to be on a flight like this before you hopped on? She would have said the same as my mum. No. So it's completely uncertain. And so I just encouraged her to concentrate on her breath, basically guide her in a breathing meditation, and instantly her mind got focused on something a little bit more positive, trying to control that mind, escape from that fear that her uncontrolled was giving rise to. At that point, her riverboat cruise meant nothing. The enjoyment that she had on that boat, gone, finished. What she had in that moment was a paralyzing fear that she had no protection from. No one and nothing in her life up to that point had prepared her for that moment. And so, from my point of view, I meet people like that, and I tried to understand their experience. And without exception, I see very clearly that this experience that people have, the fear, the anxiety, the worry, the stress, that everyone has at every stage of their life, whether they're young or old, it doesn't matter the objects they're worried about or fearful of, it's the fear itself. It's the fear itself that's the real issue. And if we live with an uncontrolled mind, it's just a matter of time before it rears its ugly head. Do you know?
Don't you think, though, at one level, though, Mick, it's like that idea of being able to control that uncontrolled mind just seems so inaccessible to the vast majority of people who might be listening today.
Yeah.
It's like when I turn in and have to look at that, that's really why I'm turning back out and looking at my phone and seeking some comfort there, because as soon as I look at that and think I've got to work through that, become free of that, follow a path to becoming free of that, it just feels like too much hard work, really.
Well, I think any energy that we put into taming our mind is worthwhile, I know people do struggle a little bit with meditation practice, and maybe they don't want to.
I think they struggle a lot,
Yeah.
In this day and age, I think people struggle so much with that idea of meditation.
But I think one of the greatest tragedies is to have a human life and not have a crack at trying to resolve the issues within. From the Buddhist point of view, these issues have been with us for a long time. And yeah, of course, they've been rampant in previous lives, they've been rampant in this life. To think it's too big a job is a thought that we've had in previous lives too. And so if we keep following that thought, it's going to keep us in the same situation, which is a situation that we don't want to be faced with. No one wants to be in the position of that woman sitting next to me in that flight, to have that fear. No one wants to be at a stage of life like my mum and think, how on earth did I get here? So preparing our mind is a little bit sort of opening our eyes just to the truth of life. And in reality, we can learn so much from everything that appears to us if we want to learn from that. And I think that's the main fundamental shift that needs to be made, this shift from just, living a life in which we're just looking at what the world has to offer us from the point of view of temporary pleasures and so forth, to what does the world have to offer me from the point of view of what can I learn from everything that appears to me. I learnt a lot from that woman that was sitting next to me. I learnt a lot about how valuable meditation practice is. And you don't have to be a Buddhist master to have some level of protection here. And to whatever level of protection we have, to that level we're protected. And we can go deeper and deeper and deeper. And even just to sit down and do breathing meditation for 5 minutes and somehow tap into a little bit of peace in our heart, we'll see the protective power that we have a latent potential for in our heart that we just need to tap into. And I believe everyone's capable of this, actually. Everyone's capable of, Do you
think everyone's capable of it in 5 minutes, though? Because normally when our minds are busy, and let's say you've never tried meditation before, most people, when they turn in, that first 5 minutes is just like a thunderstorm in the mind.
Yeah.
I think maybe that's the challenge. We're expecting something in 5 minutes. It's like we can get everything else at the touch of our fingers, at the swipe of a phone.
Yes.
But that particular experience you're talking about, it's very, very rare to be able to access that in 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes for most people.
Yeah. Rare, but possible. And that's what we need to focus on, the possibility.
Yeah.
So even if we're sitting there for 5 minutes and the mind's like a washing machine, just that, just that intention to go inside is the beginning of the process of finding something inside. Without beginning to look inside, how can we find anything in there? If we're always looking outside, what we're going to find,
So it's really more about being open to the possibility, not necessarily the reality that's what you're going to face.
Yeah.
But as you said as well, it's like having that vision that maybe I can use this as a tool to begin to open up and experience that potential.
Of course,
but
yes.
Like that openness to possibility is really the kind of opening of that door.
Yeah, but also we can talk about formal meditation as we're sort of alluding to here, but informal meditation is vitally important, especially for busy people. And what I mean by that is become a student of life, learn from life. Because the more we tune into life, the more the unhelpful minds begin to dissipate. Like, for example, like so many of our problems come from strong craving, or we say attachment to things, attachment to the fulfillment of our wishes, or attachment to pleasures and so forth. But if we learn to sort of see the transitory nature of these pleasures, it sort of cuts through the power of that unhelpful mind, and thereby helping us to experience a little bit more peace in our heart. Because the only things that really disturb our peace lie within. So if we learn to change or develop special ways of thinking about things, begin to drop the unrealistic expectations we have, drop the idea that there should be certainty in an uncertain world and so forth, we begin to tune into reality. And once our mind tunes into reality, it begins to settle. It's like a car, like an engine in a car that's tuned, When our mind's tuned into reality, it becomes more peaceful. And if we take those truths that we see in our daily life and deepen them through actual meditation, they become more deeply ingrained in our heart until eventually inseparably mixed with our mind, And at that point, these what we call virtuous states of mind or positive states of mind protect us from anything that could potentially trigger us in the negative way that it used to trigger us. So instead of a bumpy flight triggering anxiety, it now triggers me to go in, because it reminds me I need protection inside. I can't stop a flight from bumping around. I can't stop that. I can't stop it from falling from the sky, but I can stop having an unpeaceful experience as it's falling, so to speak, And that there is gold.
But how do you get to that point, Mick, where, like, we're talking about, and rightly so, what you're explaining is this idea that we can begin to change the mind. We can begin to change how we see things. We can begin to transform how we relate to things. However, from vast majority of people, when we're talking about coping with uncertainty, what we're really talking about is this very uncertain world. Rapid growth of AI, constant change in geopolitical situation, war in various parts of the world, the various different conditions that are weighing heavily on us in this day and age. When most people are talking about uncertainty, they're not really talking about their internal response to that. They're really looking at this world, and the challenge is that world is getting more and more uncertain. How on earth can we encourage ourselves in that crazy, chaotic world that we live in at times to actually begin to think, no, actually, the problem's within me?
Yeah, it seems like some sort of equation going on in the mind, isn't it? This plus this equals this. And until that happens, I can't be like this. I can't have this experience. What I personally find helpful is to cut through all the political stuff behind what's happening and just tune into the suffering of living beings, right? Just strip away all the other stuff, all the other drama and circus that's going on, and just see the suffering of living beings and question really deeply what's the fundamental reason why people suffer. Because we can try to bring an end to suffering with our hands. We can try to make changes out there. But it's quite evident, like generation after generation, century after century, all this manipulation of our external world has not led to the peaceful world and the freedom from suffering that we all in our hearts want. And so therefore we need to take a different approach. Very easy to keep following the same approach, like following the sheep, to follow hatred with hatred, for example, division with division, the us and them mentality, instead of just understanding that living beings are suffering. And these are the triggers at present that are triggering off this suffering of living beings. And look deeper as to why, where it's actually stemming from. And truth, like suffering is within. There is no suffering outside the mind. Suffering is just a painful feeling. And we tend to regard the source of that as being external, which is where we get sort of caught up in a loop. That's why. And so to alleviate ourselves from suffering, we cause other people suffering, thereby create the cause of more suffering ourselves. Basic teaching on karma. But for me, again, personally, when I see what's going on, it further encourages me to go in here for answers and to help other people to begin to look in here for answers too. Because the answers to the world's problems do not lie externally, As I said, centuries of living beings or human beings have been trying to nut it out by moving the borders like lines on the map, this way and then that way. And then a couple of centuries later, go back that way and that way. And so many people are being killed in the process of this. And the irony is, like, these people will die anyway. There's no need to be impatient, They'll die. You don't need to go off and throw bombs at people to destroy these so-called enemies. The enemies that are appearing are just reflections of our own fears, our own worries, our own insecurities. Until the inner issue of that's resolved, the conflict, the wars and so forth we see in the world will never see an end to, because the conflict within rages within. Like, if people's minds were truly at peace, there would be no conflict in the world. It really is that simple. I know it sounds simple, and people say, oh, it's a bit idealistic. But what other option is there, to be honest? Do we keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result? Or do we actually sort of take stock of the situation and think, well, actually, we've done this to death, literally. How many more generations of suffering do there need to be before we actually take responsibility of what's in our own hearts and make some fundamental changes in here?
So if someone is listening to this today and they're thinking, okay, so obviously I need to in some way look within to find a better way of coping with uncertainty. Firstly, and I think really importantly, what exactly is that tendency within the mind that's creating this inability to cope with uncertainty? What is it that's really in that situation arising within my mind that's creating this kind of instability when I meet uncertainty? And also maybe on a follow-on from that is like, what would the solution be to dealing with that? Like, what would be the practical steps to being able to cope with that debilitating feeling or experience?
Yeah, I think at the core of it would have to be our unrealistic desires, unrealistic wishes. Like, for example, it doesn't matter how much I want to remain youthful. It's not going to happen. There's some more grey hairs.
Isn't it?
Yeah, of course.
Aren't we going to stay young forever?
Oh, yes. It's like, this is not Disneyland. It's just, this is life. And so we have all these unrealistic wishes which are so contradictory to the way things are. Like, for example, we may have plans to go out tomorrow, for example, and we get onto Google that night and look at the weather forecast for the next day. And the weather forecast says, oh, it's going to be sunny. So therefore, I can fulfill my wishes to do whatever I want to do, blah, blah, blah. And then we wake up and we look out the window and it's overcast. Oh, damn you, Google. You got it wrong. Like that. And we sort of, it shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. This sort of resistant mind as to what's going on. Instead of thinking, well, it is the way it is. Let's get an umbrella and go out. So acceptance is a solution-orientated mind. It's more in tune with, it is the way it is. I'm looking at the situation. It is what it is. Now what can I do? As opposed to, it shouldn't be like this. I planned for this. I wanted it to be like this. but actually it's not like this. We have to let go of that unrealistic wish to move forward mentally. And this is, I think, why we struggle a lot, because despite all of our plans, all of our wishes that we have, life keeps throwing at us situations, people, events, and so forth that are contrary to that. No one wants to grow old, but everyone grows old. No one wants to become sick, but everyone becomes sick. No one wants to die, but everyone dies. I didn't want to die. I didn't want to get old. I didn't want to get sick. Like, who chooses to wake up in the morning, please, may I get the flu today? Please, may I get, barley belly today? And be sort of, no one prays for that, but it comes. And the key is just, well, it's here now. What can I do about it? And so release the mind from that thought, it shouldn't be other than this.
See, that's interesting, isn't it? I've often thought that when we explore these kind of topics, it's, what does it mean, release the mind from that wish, when that wish is consuming you at that time, or that expectation is consuming it? I don't want it to rain. I don't want this situation. I don't want to be ill. The idea of like release the mind from the grip of that.
Yeah.
To most of us just seems that is so important. What does that even mean? I'm like consumed by this thing. And then, once I release it, then accept. What does that mean? At what level accept? Do you know what I mean? Because I'm still in the face of in the force of this powerful kind of expectation.
Yes.
And I'm faced with this reality that I'm struggling with. Release in what way does that mean?
I can't say for certain that I'm going to be alive at the end of the day. I can make plans, but I can't say for certain that. So there's nothing wrong with making plans, but having that openness of mind to think it can go sideways, it can go a different way. Am I okay about that? Am I ready for that? Like that. And what that means is to have a mind that's at peace with that. And so therefore, our mind, we're not relying upon things to go right for us all the time to be happy, for that equation, this plus this equals that. But it's like a peaceful mind equals happiness. That's the actual equation that we need to get to. And learning to fundamentally accept the truth of uncertainty in this life helps us to keep that mind in a state of peace. And further to that, again, from my own personal point of view, I quite often think about impermanence, because it's one thing to, respond in the moment to a situation, but it's also, I think it's useful to have an underpinning sort of understanding of the nature of our reality as that being impermanent. And that in itself helps to lessen the power of that unhelpful thought gripping tightly, thinking it should be like this.
How does it do that?
Because in the next moment, it's past. It's like, for example, if we go to a river, we can take a snapshot of that river with our phone, and we'll never see that again. Even one moment later, it's past. So the difficult moment that we have now will pass. All the difficult moments that we've lived or we've experienced in this life, they've already passed.
Why is it then they feel like they haven't in the next moment?
That's because we keep going back and bringing them back in. Like that, we keep grasping onto them. It's almost as if our mind is still trying to process it. The mind's trying to work out what on earth happened to me there, what happened in that situation. The mind's still trying to process it like that. It's where like resentment sort of stems from, an inability to sort of process and let go of what's happened.
So we're bringing a past that's already gone into a present.
Yeah, we just keep rubbing salt into the wound, and that's the issue with the mind. So of course, if we live with that mind of resentment, sort of keep rubbing salt into the wound, for example, then that's going to be our experience moving forward, because it's our mind that fundamentally determines the quality of our life in any given moment, not the past, present, or future as such, but how we're responding to that. And so if we tune into impermanence, we're living a little bit more moment by moment, like that. And so things happen, we don't cling on to them and are holding on to them, because in truth you can't hold on to them. only as a memory. We can't undo the past. We can't go back there as such. It's happened. And that's where we need to get to. It's happened. It's happened.
Why do I want to hold on to a painful past?
Well, good question. Why do you want to hold on to a painful past? It's a bit silly, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a bit silly if we understand that by holding on to it in this way, we're just hurting ourselves.
But why do I want it then? Why am I? Because I don't want to hurt myself.
We don't want to hurt ourselves. It's just a bad habit. And it's a habit that we need to break by thinking about the consequence of remaining with that habit. We struggle to let go of things in the past because we may feel a little bit guilty. Like, for example, when someone close to us passes away, and people hold on, like the mind holds on to that person, almost like wishing for a leaf that fell from a tree to rejoin the branch. It's an unhelpful wish to have. I wish I could see them again. Can't let go. And that person is it's almost thinking that by letting go, I'm doing that person a disservice, like it's a disrespect. I must hold on to that person. But within Buddha's teachings, we understand that we can hold on to objects with a different grip. You know, if you use the example of a glass, I can hold it tightly like this, or like this, like that, or I can just rest it on my hand like that. So I can hold on to things tightly with a mind of attachment, tightly with a mind of hatred, for example. The mind biting onto those things, not wanting to let go, like that. The mind unable to process and let go of that. Or I can begin to choose, and it becomes our choice once we learn the methods, to choose a more gentle approach. So not to dismiss our memories, not to dismiss what happened in the past, but to see them in a different light, to hold them with a different mind, a mind that has learnt from that. And that through that learning, we move on in a positive direction moving forward.
So for someone who, for example, they've broken up with their partner and they just find it so hard to let them go, like you say, the holding maybe grip, and as you say, this attachment, the holding that person quite tightly in their mind, what is the alternative? Because it feels like that is the only option for someone in that space, especially if they didn't want the breakup or they didn't want that situation. What is the alternative to holding it with that mind of attachment and that kind of debilitating emotions it can create? So what's the alternative for them?
Well, to answer that, recently I attended the funeral of a friend's mum, and I was asked if I could say a couple of words at the funeral. Very humbled by that, and she was a really beautiful person. This my friend's mum, really, really loving heart, and of course, difficult to let go. Well, many people to let go of a person like that. But what I think is key in that sort of relationship, we'll talk a little bit more about different relationship shortly, but in that sort of relationship, like a family sort of relationship, difficult to let go of someone that holding on to. I think key is to learn to appreciate the person and the time that we had, and not allow ourselves to be governed by unrealistic wishes, i.e. wishing to see them again, wishing to make amends and so forth, because that water's past now, the river's past. So we need to learn from that and think how lucky I was to have met that person, and learn from that person's good qualities and think, I want that quality to remain in this world, and I'm going to become the embodiment of that quality, like that. So very beautiful, instead of holding on and feeling grief. Not helpful at all, to be honest. So learning to accept the finality of death and learning to appreciate the person and the qualities of that person. And that instantly lifts the heart, like that. And then we become like a source of refuge for other people. In terms of other relationships, like the sort of romantic type of relationship, well, it's like, I wish you well. And if we truly love the person, we'd want them to be happy. Tough. Because I think quite often we don't really understand the nature of our relationships, whether it be with people or even inanimate objects, until we're separated from them. We may think that we have love for a person, but when we're parted from them temporarily or permanently, then we feel pain. And people would say, actually, I feel that pain, I feel that grief or whatever because I love them so much. It's not true. Love is not a source of pain. It's attachment to the person, attachment to the object that's the source of the pain. And so we need to let go of the attachment, let go of that grip that we have. Again, we can, if we had a nice relationship with that person, we can think how lucky I was to spend that time with that person. Mentally draw a line in the sand and let that time go into the past. Appreciate the person for who they were and move forward in our life, not allow that relationship to be an anchor holding us back.
There's just one point I just want to touch on this, because I know so many people feel this, and I've heard this so many times, and I can totally understand where that's coming from. Many people say the meaning of my life, though, is my family. The meaning of my life is my friends. Is this in any way what you're saying in contradiction to that? Because there are so many people who feel that is the meaning of my life, family and friends.
According to the spiritual development, then the meaning of our life is to ripen our potential within. But to grow that potential of love, compassion, patience, and so forth, we need people in our life. And in truth, from the point of view of those people that we have in our relationships, what do they need from us? Do they need a person that clings on to them, that becomes like an emotional mess when something goes wrong in their life, when they become sick? Or do they need a partner, a husband, a wife, a friend that's really, really stable, very, very caring, and able to see what's going on in their life without flinching? Which person do we need to be for them? So I find that quite useful to think like that sometimes. What do they need me to become for them? And that very much is in line with prioritizing inner development, because it's only through developing ourselves within that we become that person that everyone, not just our friends and family, but everyone on this planet needs to see in this world.
So in a sense, our family become a vehicle through which we increase that sense of meaning and purpose.
Yes.
And there's no contradiction. It's just trying to
Yep.
love them more, have more
Yep.
compassion for them, more acceptance of them. So it's like quite a powerful expression of that.
Yeah, that's right. It's like my relationship with my mum was no obstacle to my spiritual development. It was like a little kickstart.
The fuel,
a bit more fuel for it.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we need these relationships to help us in this way. Yeah.
One thing I'm really interested to explore, Mick, is what is the difference between detachment and non-attachment? So many people maybe hear this kind of talk and this kind of teachings and these kind of ideas, and in some way think it means that I in some way become detached from life. Of course, it's not that, but what exactly is the difference between detachment and non-attachment?
Yeah, my understanding would be that detachment is like a disconnect, to disengage, whereas non-attachment is not about disengaging. It's about connecting in a different way, a more realistic and helpful way. So we, within spiritual practice, we are encouraged to practice non-attachment instead of attachment. So they're opposites. Yeah. Non-attachment works well with, say, love, whereas love and attachment are opposites. Like love is based on a wish for other people to be happy, whereas attachment is about our wish to be happy, and we're relying upon that person to make us happy as such. So without attachment, or having non-attachment, we're not clinging onto the person as being a source of happiness. Instead, we have space in our heart to fill it with a mind wishing them to be happy. So we can say that non-attachment and love work very well together. Whereas sometimes I say in teaching is like attachment and love is like vodka and orange. Okay? And so part of that drink is nourishing. It's quite healthy, the orange bit. And then the vodka bit is very intoxicating. And in the same way at present we have like a mixture of love and attachment for people. But because we don't distinguish the two, we tend to blame love for the faults of attachment. But it's like blaming the faults of vodka on orange juice. In the same way that we can separate the vodka from the orange juice, so too we can separate love from attachment. We can sort of reduce the attachment that we have for people by practicing non-attachment, which means to not rely upon them to make me happy, to provide me with happiness, but instead rely upon my love for them to make me happy, rely upon love, compassion, and so forth, as opposed to external sources of happiness.
How do I avoid slipping into this experience of detachment in that process and then getting it confused? How do I avoid that?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, I think people do slip into a little bit of detachment, sometimes because, maybe they have been burnt in a relationship before. And so...
Is it like love at a distance kind of feeling?
Well, not even that. Like detachment you're talking about. No, it's like I don't want to get close to that. I don't want to get close because I might get hurt again. Believing that the power to get hurt is coming from them. In the same way as previous, I believe the power to be happy was coming from them. We've externalized the sources of our pleasure and our pain. And therefore we're sort of stuck in a reality in which we're sort of running towards the people that we believe will provide us with that pleasure and running away from, being distant from, disconnected from those that have the potential to cause us the pain. Whereas within Buddha's teachings, we're encouraged to draw closer to the mind of love, which will protect us from pain and enhance our relationships. It doesn't mean that the person will be nice to us, but that mind of love will protect us from, the pains that come from attachment. So we can reduce our attachment to people, as with meditations and say impermanence, realizing that it's not really practical or suitable to become attached to that which we have to leave behind, or that which is not there in the next moment, for example. It's nonsensical to do that. I remember my teacher saying in a teaching once that I, who am impermanent, have attachment for others who are impermanent. This is nonsense. This is ridiculous. Therefore, stop this attachment. That's not the same as saying I, who am impermanent, have love for others who are impermanent. It's not the same as that, because love and attachment are very different. In truth, because I'm impermanent and because others are impermanent, I need to love them and not be attached to them, because love from moment to moment is my source of happiness.
Well, Mick, thanks so much for today. Really appreciate all of that. It's been really fascinating journey with you. So thanks so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.